We're married now. Mom, send me the key to the Nantucket house. My son's words cut through me like a blade of pure ice. No hello, how are you? No explanation, certainly no apology for having excluded me from one of the most significant moments of his life. Just a demand, delivered with the casual expectation of someone who has never been denied anything. I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, and gazed out at the vast Atlantic Ocean that had borne witness to every triumph and tragedy of my life for the past 40 years. The same Atlantic that held my father's ashes, my husband's ashes, and would one day hold my own. Daniel, I managed, my voice calmer than my heart. You got married? Yeah, last weekend. Listen, Sophia has always dreamed of honeymooning at the Nantucket house. We need the keys as soon as possible. We want to head up tomorrow for a month, maybe longer. Sophia. A name I'd never heard until that moment. My new daughter-in-law, apparently, though I couldn't picture her face, didn't know her voice, had been given no opportunity to welcome her into our family. And now they wanted my home, not just any home, but the iconic beach house my father, Alexander Vogel, had purchased with the proceeds from his legendary screenplays. The home where the titans of Hollywood once sat at our dining table, where my children had built sandcastles, where I had held my husband's hand as he took his last breath 5 years ago. I didn't know you were seeing anyone seriously, I said, choosing my words with care. I would have loved to have been at your wedding. It was just a small, spontaneous thing. You wouldn't have liked it anyway. His dismissal was casual, practiced. So, the keys. Can you have them messengered over today? A memory surfaced. Daniel, age 7, standing in this very kitchen, demanding the last piece of chocolate cake I'd saved for his sister. When I suggested he share, he'd thrown a tantrum that ended with the cake on the floor and no one getting dessert. Some patterns establish themselves early.
Daniel, you haven't even met Sophia.
Perhaps you could both come for dinner first. We could celebrate properly. Oh, Mom, there's no time for that. Sophia has auditions next month. This is our window for a honeymoon. His impatience crackled through the phone. It's just a house. You can stay at your city apartment.
Just a house.
As if the walls that had absorbed decades of laughter and tears and whispered confidences were merely an asset for him to use at will. Your sister is bringing the girls for their usual summer visit next week, I reminded him, referring to Amelia's teenage daughters who spent every July with me. A tradition as reliable as the tides. They can skip a year or stay in a hotel. Amelia can afford it with that university salary of hers. I closed my eyes, a familiar weight settling on me. The burden of being the family peacemaker, the one who gives in, who accommodates, who smooths the ripples my son causes. It was a role I'd played since Henry died, perhaps even before, but something was different today. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of his demand. Maybe it was the complete disregard for familial bonds. Or maybe, at 69, I had simply reached my limit. Who is she, Daniel? I asked softly. What?
Sophia?
Your wife. The woman you've apparently known long enough to marry, but not long enough to introduce to your family. She's an actress, incredibly talented. You'll meet her eventually. Look, about the keys. How long have you known her? An irritated sigh. Does it matter?
We're in love. It's the real thing.
Can we get back to the point? It matters to me, I said, my voice finding a firmness I hadn't needed to use with him since his teens. I'm trying to understand why my son would get married without his family present and then immediately demand access to a family home that holds so much meaning for all of us. Oh, Mom, it's not that complicated. We wanted privacy for our wedding and a beautiful place for our honeymoon. Why are you making this so difficult? The problem with raising children in privilege is that entitlement can take root unnoticed, like an invasive species that seems harmless until it suddenly chokes out everything of value. I need to think about it, Daniel, I said finally. This is all very sudden. What is there to think about?
It's the family beach house.
I'm family. I need it for a month. Simple. Not simple. Nothing about this was simple. Not the marriage I knew nothing about, not the timing of this request, not the nagging suspicion forming in my gut that there was more to this story than impulsive romance. "Let me think about it," I repeated. "I'll be in touch." "Mom, we need an answer now. Sophia has already started packing. She's so excited about." I said I'll be in touch. My tone left no room for argument, a remnant of the authority I once wielded effortlessly when my children were small. "Congratulations on your wedding, Daniel. I look forward to meeting Sophia soon." I hung up before he could argue further, placing my phone on the counter with deliberate care. For several minutes, I just stood there, gazing out at the ocean that had witnessed every chapter of my life. The tide was coming in, the waves crashing against the shore with increasing intensity. They wanted my house. Not just a house, but the soul of our family, the repository of our most precious memories. And they wanted it without so much as a proper introduction. I picked my phone up again and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in years. Theodore Black, private investigator, the same man who had handled several delicate matters discreetly for my late husband. "Theo," I said when he answered, "this is Olivia Brand. I need your services." Very discreet, very fast. After explaining what I needed, I made a second call, this one to my lawyer, Margaret Klein. "Margaret, I need to make some immediate changes to my estate plans. How quickly can we make that happen?" As I laid out what I wanted, a plan began to form in my mind. Daniel and his mysterious bride wanted access to the Nantucket house. They were about to receive something far more valuable than keys, the truth. I smiled as I ended the call. A smile not of joy, but of resolve. I would not be rushing to messenger the keys, as my son so confidently expected. Instead, I would be preparing a different kind of wedding gift. One that would reveal exactly what kind of woman had married into our family, and what kind of mother I truly was. Sometimes, at 69, you discover you're not quite done surprising people, even yourself. 3 days later I would personally deliver an elegantly wrapped box to Daniel's loft in the city, but leave it with his doorman with the instructions that it was a wedding gift that required immediate attention. Inside was not the key to the Nantucket house, but something that would make his new bride scream like nothing else. I simply smiled, hung up the phone and waited for the inevitable explosion. When you've lived in film circles as long as I have, you develop a certain instinct for people. My father called it the screenwriter's sense, the ability to see the hidden motivations behind a character's actions, to anticipate the plot twist before it's revealed. It served him well for 40 years as a screenwriter, and it has served me just as well for 69 years in life. Something about Daniel's sudden marriage set off every alarm bell I possessed.
Theodore Black _ Urgency.
Within hours of my call, he had a preliminary report on Sophia Schreiber. Or rather, Sarah Miller. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, to unremarkable parents who still lived in the same modest tract home she grew up in. She did a thorough reinvention, Theo explained during our meeting at a discreet cafe far from Nantucket. Legally changed her name at 22, shed her accent, constructed a whole new background. Standard procedure for many in the industry, but she was particularly thorough. I sipped my Earl Grey, absorbing the information. And her acting career? Minimal credits. A few commercials, background work, one speaking role in an indie film that never got distribution. He slid a file across the table. But her relationship history is where things get interesting. The folder contained photos, dates, names, a meticulous chronicle of Sophia's romantic entanglements over the last 5 years. Director Julian Keller, 30 years her senior, whose period drama had featured Sophia in a small but pivotal role until their engagement abruptly ended after filming Wrapped. Producer Raymond Wagner, whose streaming series mysteriously cast her over more established actresses, until their relationship cooled when the show wasn't renewed. Each relationship followed the same pattern: an older, established man in a position of power, a brief period of professional advancement for Sophia, then a carefully orchestrated exit once she had what she needed.
And Daniel?
I asked, looking at a recent photo of my son and Sophia at an industry event, his arm possessive around her waist, her smile calculated for maximum effect. They met approximately 4 months ago at a Film Preservation Society benefit.
Theo hesitated.
A benefit held last March at your Nantucket house, which you were unable to attend due to your sister's health issues.
The revelation hit me like a physical blow.
She had been in my house before she met Daniel. According to my sources, she specifically attended the event to network with industry executives. Several witnesses recall her asking detailed questions about the estate itself, who owned it, its history, its value. So the house was the target from the beginning, I murmured as the pieces clicked into place.
Note Daniel.
He was likely identified as the access point after the event. His reputation for being susceptible to beautiful, ambitious women is, Theo searched for a diplomatic phrase, quite well known in certain circles. A polite way of saying my son had a pattern of being manipulated by women who recognized and exploited his insecurities. His father and I had tried to address this tendency in his early 20s, only to be dismissed as meddling and out of touch. There's more, Theo continued, flipping to the last pages of the report.
MS.
Schreiber has been meeting with real estate developers who specialize in residential to commercial conversions, specifically luxury boutique hotels. My stomach tightened as I looked at the surveillance photos of Sophia in animated conversation with men in expensive suits, blueprints spread between them on restaurant tables. The most recent meeting was 3 weeks ago, Theo noted, just before the wedding. The gentleman on the left is a Mr. King, from Coastal Vista Developments. They specialize in acquiring beachfront properties for high-end resort conversions. The final piece fell into place. It wasn't just the house Sophia wanted, it was what the house could become. A landmark property with Hollywood history, situated on one of the most desirable stretches of coastline on Nantucket, would be worth millions of dollars as a boutique hotel. Have you tracked her communications with these developers? I asked. Theo shook his head. That would require accessing her personal devices, legally questionable territory. He slid another folder toward me, however. We did manage to record several conversations between Ms. Schreiber and her friend, Nadine Schultz, in public places. The transcripts are illuminating. I paged through dialogue that confirmed my worst fears. Daniel is such a perfect mark. Desperate for validation, completely blind to manipulation, and the direct line to that incredible estate. His mother's nearly 70. How much longer can she hold on to a place like that? Once you're married, it's just a matter of time before you can convince him to sell. The developers are offering a 7-figure finder's fee for just bringing them the property. Imagine what we could do with that kind of money. The most damning exchange had taken place just days before the wedding. Nadine, what if his mother refuses to hand over the house? Sophia, she won't. Daniel says she never denies him anything. Besides, all we need is a foot in the door. Once we're in residence, I can start planting the idea of selling. The old lady won't live forever, and when she's gone, Daniel gets his share.
The old lady.
I was reduced to an inconvenient obstacle on their path to a fortune.
What about Daniel?
I asked, my voice tighter than I'd intended. Is there any indication he's aware of her motives? Nothing we've found, Theo replied, his expression softening with a rare sympathy. All evidence suggests Mr. Brand believes this is a genuine romantic relationship.
My poor, foolish son.
Always searching for love in the wrong places, always vulnerable to those who recognized his desperate need for admiration. For all his outward success, the Grammy nominations, the high-profile clients, the lavish lifestyle, Daniel had never overcome the deep-seated insecurity that drove him to seek validation from people who would never truly value him. Thank you, Theo, I said, gathering the folders. This is exactly what I needed. What will you do now? He asked. I smiled, a calm settling over me as my plan solidified. First, I'm going to speak with my lawyer to ensure certain documents are in order. Then, I'm going to prepare a wedding gift Ms. Schreiber will never forget. Driving home to Nantucket along the coastal highway, watching the waves crash against the shore, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had raised my children to believe in love, in family, in the values my father had instilled in me. Daniel had strayed from those values, seduced by the high glamour of the industry that had made our family's fortune, but I was still Olivia Brand, daughter of Alexander Vogel. I had watched legends of the screen debate art and life on my patio. I had built and lost and rebuilt a life of substance. I would not be outmaneuvered by an ambitious actress from Cleveland with dreams of turning my family's sanctuary into a boutique hotel. My father's voice seemed to whisper in my ear as I pulled into the driveway of the home he had loved so much. Every great script needs a third-act twist, Liv. Make it count. I fully intended to. Margaret Klein's law office always reminded me of a movie set, everything precisely arranged for maximum effect, from the panoramic views of downtown Boston to the strategic placement of her impressive credentials on the walls. Today, the conference room felt like the perfect backdrop for the scene we were about to stage. "Are you sure about this, Olivia?" Margaret asked, sliding the finalized documents across the polished table. At 58, she had handled my legal affairs for over 20 years, ever since she'd impressed Henry with her razor-sharp mind and unflinching honesty. "Absolutely sure," I replied, signing where indicated. "The house was always intended for my grandchildren. This just makes it official."
And Daniel?
"He's not going to take this well." I paused, the pen hovering over the final signature line. Daniel needs to learn that actions have consequences. Besides, this isn't about punishing him. It's about protecting what's important. "The irrevocable nature of this trust means you can't change your mind later," she warned.
I won't be changing my mindestens.
I signed with a flourish, feeling the weight of finality in the motion. Some decisions only need to be made once. After leaving Margaret's office, I drove to my city apartment, a sleek, modern space in a high-rise that Daniel had always preferred to the Nantucket house. "It's more my vibe," he'd once declared, as if history and beauty were merely aesthetic choices rather than foundations of identity. I'd arranged to meet Amelia there, away from prying ears in Nantucket. My daughter arrived promptly, as always, a trait she inherited from her father. At 44, her academic career firmly established and her daughters growing into remarkable young women, Amelia had become my confidant in a way Daniel had never managed. "Mom," she said, hugging me warmly. "What's this emergency meeting about? Your text sounded ominous." "Your brother got married," I said without preamble, watching her reaction. Her eyebrows shot up. "Daniel got married? To whom?" My question exactly. I motioned for her to sit as I poured us both glasses of the Sauvignon Blanc she favored. "An actress named Sophia Schreiber. Someone he's never mentioned to either of us." Amelia accepted the wine, her academic mind visibly processing the information. "That's unexpected. Daniel has always been impulsive, but to get married without telling anyone. It gets worse." I sat down opposite her, gathering my thoughts. He called to inform me of this marriage as a prelude to demanding the keys to the Nantucket house for their honeymoon. For at least a month, possibly longer. During our annual visit. The girls have been looking forward to it all year. Outrage flashed across her face. "That's completely unacceptable." "Indeed. Which is why I had Miss Schreiber investigated." "Mom." Amelia's shock was plain.
You hiret a private investigator.
Something felt wrong, I explained, unapologetic. My instincts were correct. I summarized Theo's findings: Sophia's reinvented identity, her pattern of strategic relationships, her meetings with developers, her targeted pursuit of Daniel as an access point to the Nantucket estate. With each revelation, Amelia's expression shifted from shock, to anger, to a grim understanding. "She's a predator," she concluded dryly. "And Daniel is, for all intents and purposes, her mark." "Yes." "Have you told him?" I shook my head. He wouldn't believe me. You know how defensive he gets, especially about his relationships. He would assume I was meddling, being overprotective. "So, what's your plan?" Amelia leaned forward, ever the pragmatist. "I assume you have one, or you wouldn't have asked me here." I smiled, appreciating her directness. "I've restructured the trust that holds the Nantucket property. Effective immediately, it bypasses both you and Daniel and will pass directly to your daughters upon my death, with you as trustee until they are 30. She blinked, taking it in. "That's significant. Daniel will be furious." "Daniel will understand eventually, when he's capable of growth." I took a sip of wine. There's more. I've prepared a wedding gift for the happy couple.
A comprehensive dossier on Sophia's true intentions, along with the new trust documents.
I'm having it delivered tomorrow. Amelia was silent for a long moment. You know this will likely end their marriage. That is rather the point. And potentially damage your relationship with Daniel permanently. I met my daughter's concerned gaze steadily. I'm willing to risk that to protect him from someone who sees him only as an access point to property and money. What kind of mother would I be if I stood by and allowed that to happen? Amelia sighed, tracing a finger around the rim of her glass. A less confrontational one perhaps, but not a better one. She reached for my hand. The girls and I will support whatever you decide. Just try to remember that Daniel, for all his faults, is still the little boy who used to fall asleep on your lap during movie nights. That image, Daniel, age 6, curled up against me as we watched his grandfather's films, asking endless questions about how stories were made, sent an unexpected pang through my heart. When had that curious, loving child turned into a man who would exclude his family from his wedding and then demand access to our most precious shared space? The next morning, I put the finishing touches on my wedding gift. The package was deceptively beautiful, heavy cream-colored paper embossed with the brand family crest, tied with real silk ribbon. Inside the main box was a smaller one, an antique film canister that had once held the original print of my father's most famous screenplay. It seemed fitting to use it now for what might be the most dramatic scene of my own life. Inside the canister, I arranged 3 items with careful precision. First, the newly executed trust documents, establishing my granddaughters as the future owners of the Nantucket estate, with specific language prohibiting its sale or commercial development. Second, the comprehensive dossier on Sophia Schreiber, her fabricated background, her pattern of industry relationships, transcripts of her conversations about using Daniel to access the property, photos of her meetings with developers, and detailed timelines proving she had targeted our family home before she ever met my son. Third, a personal, handwritten letter on the stationery Henry had given me for our last anniversary. Not an angry or accusatory screed, but something more powerful, the truth about heritage, about family, about the difference between possession and legacy. As I sealed the package, I considered what waited on the other side of this decision. Daniel's inevitable fury, Sophia's exposed duplicity, the potential fracturing of what family ties remained. But I also thought about what I was protecting, not just a valuable piece of real estate, but the soul of our family, the place where my father had written words that moved millions, where my children had learned to swim and dream and believe in something larger than themselves, where my granddaughters would one day bring their own children to hear stories about their remarkable great-grandfather. Some things transcended the immediate pain of confrontation. Some legacies were worth fighting for, even at the cost of temporary peace. I called my most trusted driver, gave him the package with specific instructions, and then I waited. By tonight, Daniel and his bride would know exactly who they were dealing with. Not a compliant matriarch who could be easily manipulated, but a woman determined to protect what mattered most. The ocean seemed particularly restless today, the waves crashing against the shore with a thundering resolve. I watched from my patio, a cup of tea cooling beside me, bracing for the storm that was about to break over our family. Let it come. I had weathered worse. The call came at exactly 7:43 p.m. I know because I was watching the antique grandfather clock in my living room, matching my breaths to its steady rhythm as I waited. When my phone lit up with Daniel's name, I let it ring twice before answering, my voice deliberately calm. Hello, Daniel. What followed was not speech but a cacophony. Sophia's high-pitched shrieking in the background. Items crashing to the floor. My son's voice, distorted with rage. What the hell did you do? Daniel's words finally cut through the chaos. I sent a wedding gift, I replied evenly. I take it you opened it. Are you insane? Sophia is. His voice broke off as another crash sounded, followed by more unintelligible screaming. She's having trouble maintaining her composure, it seems, I observed. Perhaps that's what happens when one's true intentions are exposed. These accusations they're completely false, he stammered, but the uncertainty beneath his outrage was palpable. You fabricated all of this. I don't fabricate evidence, Daniel. Everything in that dossier is meticulously documented. The transcripts, the photos, the timeline. Your bride has been planning to use you to access the Nantucket estate from the moment she saw it, before she ever met you. Another crash in the background. Sophia's voice, suddenly clearer. That bitter old woman, she can't prove anything. Actually, I can, I murmured, though I doubted Daniel could hear me over the tumult on his end. And the trust documents, Daniel said, his voice dropping. You changed the trust. You cut me out completely. I protected the house from those who see it as nothing more than a commodity to be exploited. I kept my tone matter-of-fact, though my heart ached at the betrayal in his voice. The estate will pass to your nieces, with your sister as trustee. The girls who have spent every summer of their lives there. The next generation of our family. You had no right. I had every right. The house is mine, Daniel. Not yours. Not yet. And now, not ever. The directness of my own words surprised me, but there was no gentler truth to offer. The background noise shifted suddenly. A door slammed. Sophia's voice was now distant but still loud. Daniel's breathing was heavy in my ear. She's locked herself in the bathroom, he said, his voice hollow. Says she's calling her lawyer. Says we can fight this. She can certainly try, I let a hint of steel enter my tone, but I think you'll find I was extremely thorough. Silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of complicated history. All the times I had given in to his demands, smoothed over his mistakes, prioritized his comfort over confronting his behavior. We had arrived at a precipice neither of us had seen coming, yet one that, in retrospect, seemed inevitable. Did you know? His voice was suddenly small, reminiscent of the little boy who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed. When I called about the house, did you suspect her already? I suspected something was wrong, I admitted. The timing, the secrecy, the immediate demand for the house. It fit a pattern I've seen before. In my relationships, you mean, bitterness crept into his tone, because I'm such a predictable failure at them. Because you've made yourself vulnerable to a certain kind of manipulation, I corrected gently. There's a difference. Another crash on his end, followed by Sophia's voice, suddenly crystal clear, as if she'd grabbed the phone. You think you're so clever, don't you? You and your precious house and your movie royalty legacy. You're just a selfish old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. I waited, unmoved by her outburst. When Daniel got the phone back, his voice was subdued. Mom, I've been reading the dossier. Daniel, I interrupted. Look at the evidence with clear eyes. Then decide if this marriage is what you truly want. And if it is. A flicker of his usual defiance returned. If I choose her despite all this? Then that is your choice. But it will not change mine regarding the house. I softened my tone slightly. The door is always open to you as my son, but not to those who would exploit our family's legacy. After we hung up, I poured a small glass of the single malt Scotch Henry had favored and carried it out to the patio. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. How many sunsets had I watched from this spot? Thousands, perhaps. Each one unique, each a reminder that endings could be beautiful, even when they held a tinge of melancholy. My phone chimed with a text from Amelia. Daniel just called, completely frantic. Said you've destroyed his life. What happened? I typed a quick reply. The wedding gift was delivered. It's going about as expected. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Her response came moments later. The girls and I are coming early. Tomorrow, instead of next week. You shouldn't be alone when the fallout hits. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Amelia. Always thoughtful, always supportive. So much like her father in all the ways that mattered most. Thank you, I replied simply. I was halfway through my scotch when the security system alerted me to an approaching car. The cameras showed a sleek red convertible racing up my driveway, braking sharply near the front entrance. Sophia got out, alone. Her movements were sharp with rage, her face a mask so contorted it would have horrified any casting director. So she had chosen a direct confrontation. I hadn't expected her to leave Daniel behind, but perhaps it was a strategic move, to face me woman to woman, to try her manipulations without his presence. I remained on the patio, watching via the security feed as she pounded on my front door. My housekeeper Maria answered, following the instructions I'd given her for this exact possibility. "Mrs. Brand isn't receiving visitors this evening." Maria's voice came through the system, clear and firm. "I'm not a visitor, I'm family," Sophia hissed. "Her daughter-in-law. Tell her to face me like a woman instead of hiding behind her files and her spies." "Mrs. Brand says you may schedule an appointment with her assistant tomorrow if you wish to discuss the matter," Maria continued, unruffled. "Good evening, Miss Schreiber." The use of her maiden name was deliberate. A small sting, petty perhaps, but I allowed myself the minor satisfaction. Sophia's reaction was volcanic. She screamed obscenities that made even me, with my decades in film circles, raise an eyebrow. When Maria simply closed the door, Sophia kicked it repeatedly before storming back to her car. But instead of driving off, she sat in the driver's seat, engine running, staring at the house with an intensity one could feel through the camera feed. After several minutes, she took out her phone, her face illuminated in the glow as she typed furiously. My own phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I will get that house, one way or another." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Theo and Margaret, more evidence of Sophia's character and intent. Then I blocked the number, finished my scotch, and went inside to get ready for the night. As I went through my evening routine, removing my makeup, applying the face cream Henry had always teased me about, "Does that stuff really work?" "It must, darling. Just look at me." Brushing my hair with the silver-handled brush that had belonged to my mother, I thought about the storm I had deliberately unleashed. Daniel would be angry for a while, perhaps a long while. Sophia would certainly try to retaliate, though her options were limited against someone with my resources and foresight. There would be unpleasantness, legal threats, perhaps even a serious attempt at a lawsuit. But the house was safe. The legacy was protected. My granddaughter's inheritance was secure. As I settled into bed, I thought of my father's favorite piece of screenwriting advice. The third act reveals the truth of who your characters really are. Live. Not through their words, but through their choices under pressure. Daniel's true character would be revealed in how he responded to this crisis. Would he cling to pride and a doomed marriage? Or would he find the strength to acknowledge the manipulation and break free? The choice was his. I had made mine. Sleep came surprisingly easily, deep and dreamless. The sleep of someone who has done what had to be done, regardless of the cost. Amelia arrived the next morning with my granddaughters in tow, the three of them bursting into the house with the energetic chaos that always made the place feel truly alive. Mia, 16 and already showing the intellectual intensity that had distinguished her mother at that age, hugged me tightly before announcing she had to finish her summer reading on the patio. Zoe, 14 and in perpetual motion, immediately headed down the beach access stairs, surfboard under her arm. "The ocean is calling," she declared with a grin that was pure Vogel family charm. "I miss these waves all year, Grandma Liv." Once the girls had dispersed, Amelia fixed me with her penetrating gaze. "You look remarkably composed for someone who just detonated a nuclear bomb in the family." Dramatic phrasing, I noted, leading her to the kitchen. "Coffee, please. And don't deflect." Daniel called me 4 times last night, each message more incoherent than the last. The final one involved threats to contest the trust, sue you for slander, and, I quote, "unearth decades-old family secrets." I raised an eyebrow as I measured out coffee grounds. Interesting threat from someone who can barely remember most family gatherings. What secrets does he imagine I have? I don't think he's thinking clearly. Sophia apparently spent the night alternating between hysterical crying and furious plotting. Sounds exhausting. Mom. Amelia's tone sharpened. This is serious. She's threatening to go to the tabloids with stories about the family, about Dad, about Grandpa. I paused, continuing to prepare the coffee with deliberate calm. Let her try. Alexander Vogel's life has been documented in 3 biographies and countless articles. There are no scandals to unearth that haven't already been examined in painstaking detail. And Dad, your father was the most ethical man I have ever known. His reputation can withstand whatever she fabricates. I poured water into the coffee maker. Besides, I have something Sophia doesn't. What's that?
Aktuell Evidenz.
I smiled thinly. Should she choose to make false public accusations, I am prepared to release the entire dossier, including her recorded statements about targeting Daniel to access the house. Amelia sighed, accepting the mug I offered her. You really have thought of everything, haven't you? I had to. I joined her at the kitchen island. This isn't just about a house, Amelia. It's about protecting what your grandfather built, what your father preserved, what I have maintained for this family, for your daughters. She was silent for a moment, sipping her coffee. And Daniel? How does he fit into this legacy you're protecting? The question struck deeper than I'd expected. Daniel has always been part of the legacy, just not in the way he wants. He's chosen a path that prioritizes instant gratification over lasting value. I can't force him to make different choices, but I can ensure those choices don't compromise what matters most. He's still your son. And I still love him. I met her gaze steadily. That hasn't changed. That won't change. But love does not require capitulation to harmful demands. Before Amelia could reply, my phone rang. Margaret Klein's office. Olivia, Margaret began without preamble, Sophia Schreiber has retained Julius Brand as counsel. They're threatening a lawsuit for alienation of affection, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Julius Brand, a flamboyant attorney known for representing celebrities in messy divorces and aggressively pursuing settlement payouts to avoid public trials. His involvement suggested Sophia was aiming for a quick financial resolution, not a protracted legal battle. Let me guess, I replied. They're offering to drop all claims in exchange for a sizable settlement. $2 million and access to the Nantucket house for 6 months of the year, to be precise. I actually laughed. Ambitious, isn't she?
What's your assessment?
Their case is flimsy at best. The evidence we gathered is substantial and properly obtained. Furthermore, truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. Margaret's tone was clinically precise. However, they're banking on your desire to avoid a public spectacle. A miscalculation on their part. I glanced out the window at my granddaughters frolicking on the property, Mia now on the patio with her book, Zoe a distant speck riding a wave. I've spent my entire adult life in film circles.
Public Spektakle dus entwrichten me.
So I should inform them we are prepared to vigorously defend against any legal action? Absolutely. And Margaret, make it clear that should they proceed, we are prepared to countersue for attempted fraud and present all evidence to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. After ending the call, I turned to find Amelia watching me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You are formidable when provoked, she remarked. I sometimes forget that beneath the elegant hostess beats the heart of a woman who once faced down studio heads to protect Dad's critical integrity. I smiled at the memory. Henry had written a scathing review of a major film produced by one of Hollywood's most powerful men. The producer had threatened to end my husband's career, showing up at our door to intimidate him directly. It had been me who sent him away, with the promise that if he continued his threats, I would make sure every journalist in town heard exactly what he had tried to do. I learned a long time ago that bullies rely on their victims' fear of confrontation, I said. Take away that fear, and they usually back down.
And if Sophia doesn't back down?
If she actually proceeds with legal action or tabloid stories. Then we will meet that challenge when it comes. I refilled my coffee. But my guess is that once she realizes I won't be intimidated into a settlement, she'll cut her losses and move on to another target. Her kind usually does.
And Daniel?
The question hung between us, the heart of the matter, the real complication that, I admitted, I couldn't predict. Daniel makes decisions emotionally rather than rationally. He always has. Whether he will see Sophia's manipulation or commit further to her defense, only time will tell. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. We need to talk. Alone. Today. I showed the message to Amelia. Will you see him? She asked. Of course. I typed a quick reply. Come for dinner. 7 p.m. Just the two of us. He's my son, regardless of the current circumstances. Should I take the girls somewhere for the evening?
I shook my head.
There's no reason to disrupt their first day here. Daniel and I can talk privately in the study. Besides, I added with a slight smile, your presence here will remind him of what family actually means. As Amelia went out to check on her daughters, I paused by the collection of family photos in the hallway. Daniel at 8, proudly holding up a fish he'd caught off the pier. Daniel at 12, sitting cross-legged beside his grandfather as Alexander explained camera angles. Daniel at 18, posing reluctantly in his graduation cap. Daniel at 30, accepting his first Grammy. Somewhere in that progression, the bright-eyed boy who once shadowed his grandfather had vanished, replaced by a man chasing external validation with increasing desperation. I hadn't fully noticed the transformation as it was happening, a failure I would always regret.
I took the frame of the fishing photo lightly.
Oh, Daniel, I murmured to the grinning child captured there, what has become of you? The question hung in the air, unanswered but persistent, as I prepared to face the confrontation the evening would surely bring. I chose my outfit for Daniel's visit with care. Not the casual elegance I usually wore around the house, but a more deliberate ensemble, the sapphire silk blouse Henry had given me for our last anniversary, the pearl earrings that had been my mother's, and the understated Cartier watch my father had gifted me when his first screenplay sold. A kind of armor, these physical links to those who had loved me unconditionally and without expectation. At 6:58 p.m., precisely, the security system announced Daniel's arrival. I watched on the monitor as he sat in his car for several moments, apparently gathering resolve, before approaching the house. His posture was rigid, his movements devoid of their usual casual confidence. I opened the door before he could ring. Daniel, I greeted him, my voice level. Come in. He stepped inside, his eyes darting around the entryway as if expecting an ambush. Where is everyone? Amelia took the girls into town for dinner. I thought we should talk privately. He nodded stiffly, following me to the kitchen where I had prepared a simple meal. The spaghetti carbonara he had loved as a child, crusty bread, a bottle of the wine he favored. Small gestures of maternal memory that seemed to catch him off guard. You cooked, he observed, the surprise momentarily displacing his defensive posture. I still remember how. I gestured to the table, already set for two. Shall we? For several minutes, we played the part of a normal dinner, serving food, pouring wine, the mechanical movements of forks and knives on plates. The silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken accusations. Daniel broke first, setting down his fork with a sharp click. I want to understand why you did this. Did what, exactly? I took a deliberate sip of wine. Investigated the woman who married my son without my knowledge? Protected the family home from someone who planned to exploit it? Changed my estate plans to secure my granddaughter's inheritance? All of it. His voice grew tense. The whole calculated attack on my marriage. Not your marriage, Daniel. Sophia's deception. I set my glass down carefully. There's a difference. You don't know her. Not really. Those recordings, those meetings. There could be explanations you haven't considered. A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. If he was looking for alternative explanations, perhaps he hadn't completely succumbed to Sophia's manipulations. What explanations would justify her calling you a perfect mark? I asked gently. Or her plans to turn the house into a boutique hotel. Or how she planned to gain access to the estate before she ever met you. He flinched, visibly. She says those recordings are taken out of context, that your detective edited them to make her look bad. Then she is adding more lies to her existing deception. I reached for the small tablet I had placed on the sideboard and slid it toward him. The full, unedited recordings are on here.
Listen for yourself.
The context is quite clear. Daniel stared at the tablet without touching it, conflict written in every line of his face.
She's my wife.
She's a predator who targeted you for access to property and money.
You never gave her a chance. A flash of anger.
You didn't even meet her before you sent that dossier. That's not how a mother treats her son's wife. You never gave me a chance to meet her, I countered calmly. You announced your marriage as a fait accompli and then immediately demanded access to the house. Those are not the actions of a son who values his mother's blessing. He pushed back from the table, rising abruptly. This is useless. You've already decided she's guilty. Nothing I say is going to change your mind. That's not true. I remained seated, maintaining my composure with an effort. I would be delighted to be proven wrong. Show me evidence that contradicts what I've found. Explain the recordings in a way that makes sense. Help me understand why my son would exclude his family from his wedding and then immediately demand access to his mother's home. Because I knew you would judge her. The words burst out of him. Just like you've judged every woman I've ever been with. Too ambitious, too shallow, too young, too interested in my connections. No one is ever good enough for your precious son. The accusation hit home, primarily because it held a kernel of truth. I had been skeptical of Daniel's romantic choices over the years, though I had tried to keep my concerns private. I have never wanted anything but your happiness, I said softly, but I will not stand by while someone exploits you, uses you to get to this house, to this family's legacy.
Legacy, legacy, legacy. He spart word like a Kurse.
That's all you care about. Grandpa's precious reputation, Dad's critical standing, your perfect family image.
What about what I want?
What about my choices? Your choices affect more than just you, Daniel. They affect everyone who cares about you. Everyone who shares this family's history. The house isn't just yours, he insisted, getting to the core of his grievance. Dad would have wanted me to have my share. Your father, I countered with careful precision, wanted this house to remain in the family as a home. Not to be sold or commercialized. The trust one established ensures exactly that. By cutting me out completely. By protecting it from those who see it as a commodity. I finally stood, meeting his gaze directly. Including your wife, who has explicitly stated her intention to turn it into a hotel as soon as I'm gone. He flinched again, another small tell that some part of him recognized the truth in my words.
Listen to the recordings, Daniel, I Uhr geht.
Read the full report. Look at the evidence with clear eyes. Then ask yourself if this marriage is what you truly want, or if it's another impulsive decision born of insecurity.
Don't psychoanalyse me.
His voice hardened. I'm not one of Grandpa's characters for you to dissect.
No.
You're my son, whom I have loved from his first breath, whom I have supported through every triumph and every mistake, whom I am, perhaps imperfectly, trying to protect even now. Something flickered in his expression. Doubt, confusion, a momentary crack in his defensive facade. Then his phone buzzed with a text message, and the moment shattered. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening.
Sophia.
She's waiting for me. Of course she is. I couldn't quite keep the weariness from my voice. She wants to know what I said, what I offered, what leverage she might still have. That's not, he paused, uncertainty creeping back into his expression. She's just worried. Take the tablet, Daniel. Listen to the recordings away from her influence. Make your decision based on facts, not on emotions manipulated by someone who sees you as a means to an end. He hesitated, then took the tablet. This doesn't change anything. I still think what you did was cruel and unnecessary. I can accept that judgment if it means you will examine the evidence. I moved toward him, risking a gentle touch on his arm. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I love you too much to watch you be exploited without at least trying to open your eyes. For a brief moment, I thought he might hug me. His body language shifted, softened. Then another text message buzzed, and the moment passed. I have to go, he said stiffly. Sophia's waiting. She usually is, I murmured. At the door, he paused. Julius Brand contacted you. Yes. $2 million and 6 months annual access to the house was the proposed settlement, I believe. Daniel's expression confirmed he hadn't known the specific demands. Another small crack in Sophia's facade. The girls are happy to be here, I added, deliberately changing the subject. Zoe's already been surfing. Mia is halfway through The Great Gatsby on the patio. A fleeting smile touched his lips. He had always, despite his generally self-absorbed lifestyle, had a special bond with his nieces. Tell them I'll see them soon. I will. After he left, I cleared away the barely touched dinner, wrapping up his portion for later, though I doubted he would return for it. The house suddenly felt enormous, even knowing Amelia and the girls would be back soon. I poured another glass of wine and stepped out onto the patio, breathing in the salt air as darkness settled over the ocean. What would you do, Henry? I asked the empty space beside me, a habit I'd developed in the years since his death. What would you say to your son? No answer came, of course. Just the eternal rhythm of the waves against the shore, the distant cry of a seabird, the whisper of the wind through the dune grass. Yet somehow, in that symphony of familiar sounds, I found a measure of peace. Daniel had taken the tablet. He would listen to the recordings, read the reports, see the evidence with his own eyes. Whether that would be enough to break through Sophia's manipulation remained to be seen. But I had done what I could. The rest would unfold as it must, with or without my intervention. I raised my glass to the darkening horizon, a toast to uncertainty and hope in equal measure. I was having breakfast with Amelia and the girls when Theo called the next morning. Mrs. Brand, I thought you should know immediately. Sophia Schreiber has been making some concerning moves. I excused myself, stepping onto the patio for privacy. What kind of moves? She visited 3 tabloid journalists yesterday. Based on my sources, she's trying to sell a story about Alexander Vogel fathering an illegitimate child in the 1960s, who was supposedly paid off to disappear. She's claiming to have documents. The accusation was so preposterous I almost laughed. That's impossible. My father's life was scrutinized by multiple biographers. There was no secret child. I agree, it's likely fabricated. But tabloids aren't overly concerned with verification when the story is sensational enough. I considered this a calculated attack not just on me, but on my father's legacy. Can you get copies of the documents she's claiming to have? Already working on it. But there's more. She also contacted Coastal Vista Developments, the firm specializing in acquiring beachfront properties for hotel conversions. A chill went down my spine, despite the morning warmth. For what purpose? Unclear at this point, but my source indicates she presented herself as someone with imminent access to your property and the authority to discuss preliminary valuations. I thanked Theo, asking him to continue monitoring the situation. Then I immediately called Margaret. I need cease and desist letters sent to several tabloids and to Coastal Vista Developments, I explained after outlining what Theo had discovered. And I want Coastal Vista officially informed that any discussions with Sophia Schreiber regarding my property are fraudulent. I'll draft them immediately, Margaret assured me. And I would suggest we prepare for the possibility of her escalating to actual slander. We should have a response strategy ready. After hanging up, I remained on the patio, watching my granddaughters on the beach below. Zoe was trying to teach Mia to surf, both of them laughing as Mia tumbled into the gentle waves. The sight of them, these remarkable young women who represented our family's future, filled me with a deep sense of gratitude that the crisis had been averted, that their eventual inheritance was protected. Amelia joined me, coffee mug in hand. More complications? I briefed her on Sophia's latest maneuvers. Her face darkened with each detail. She's vile, Amelia concluded. To attack Grandpa's reputation with fabricated scandals, that crosses a line. It's a desperate move, I agreed. She's losing control of the narrative and lashing out wherever she can. Have you heard from Daniel since last night? I shook my head. Not yet. But he took the tablet with the full evidence. He will listen to it eventually, even if it's just to try and disprove it. And when he can't? Amelia's voice had a rare edge. When he realizes you were right all along? I watched a pelican dive into the ocean, re-emerging with its prize. Then he will have a difficult choice to make. And we will have to be there for him, however he handles it. We spent the morning engaged in normal family activities, a conscious choice to maintain a sense of stability for the girls amidst the unfolding drama. I taught Mia how to bake my mother's famous cinnamon rolls, while Amelia took Zoe shopping for a new wetsuit. The rhythms of ordinary life continued, despite the extraordinary circumstances swirling around us. Just after noon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Brand. A young woman's voice, hesitant but determined.
This is Nadine Schulz.
I was
Sophia's friend.
The name registered instantly. The friend featured in several of the recorded conversations discussing the plan to target Daniel and access the house.
Yes, Ms. Schulz. I know who you are. I need to talk to you.
About Sophia. About what she's planning now. 20 minutes later, Nadine arrived at the house, a strikingly young woman in her mid-20s with an anxious energy that manifested in the constant adjustment of her jewelry as she sat opposite me in the living room. I want to be clear, she began. I'm not doing this out of loyalty to you or your son. Sophia and I had a falling out last night.
She's gone too far. In what way?
I kept my tone neutral, giving nothing away.
She wants me to notarize forged documents.
Supposed letters between your father and this woman he supposedly had a child with. Letters she created using AI to mimic his writing style, with details from his biographies to make them seem authentic. I raised an eyebrow. And you were unwilling to commit felony fraud? Nadine flinched. I've done some questionable things, but forgery that could be traced directly back to me? No. That's how people end up in prison. A wise assessment. I studied her carefully. What else is she planning? She's meeting with developers tomorrow, claiming she has power of attorney over your affairs due to your declining mental state. She has a forged document for that, too. The audacity was breathtaking. And Daniel? What does he know of these plans? Nadine shifted uncomfortably. She's keeping him firewalled, telling him you're launching a smear campaign against her that she has to fight back against, that the meetings are with PR specialists and lawyers to protect her reputation. And he believes this? I think, she hesitated. I think he wants to believe it. But last night, after he got back from dinner with you, I heard them arguing. He was asking about recordings, about meetings with developers. She was crying, saying you fabricated everything to break them up. Did he seem convinced by her explanations? Not entirely. Nadine twisted her ring nervously. That's partly why she's accelerating her plans. She's afraid she's losing her hold on him. I took this information in, assessing its reliability. Why are you telling me this, Miss Schultz?
The real reason.
She met my gaze for the first time, directly. Sophia and I have worked together before. Small cons, strategic relationships with industry men, nothing major. But this, targeting your family, fabricating scandals, forging documents, this crosses a line into serious legal consequences. I'm not going down with her. Self-preservation, then, not altruism. Still, the information was valuable. Do you have copies of these forged documents? I asked. She nodded, reaching into her purse and pulling out a brown envelope. The fake power of attorney, the forged letters, screenshots of her communications with the tabloids and developers. I accepted the envelope without opening it. You realize that by providing these, you're implicating yourself in the conspiracy up to this point. I know. She squared her shoulders. That's why I want immunity, if this ever goes to court. I'm cooperating now, before any of the more serious frauds actually happen. I will have my lawyer draft an appropriate agreement, I promised, mentally composing the message to Margaret. In the meantime, I would suggest you distance yourself from Sophia completely. Already done. I moved out of our apartment last night. She stood, clearly eager to leave. One more thing you should know. She's meeting Daniel for lunch today, at a restaurant called the Islander. She plans to convince him to sign a document giving her authority to negotiate regarding the house while he's focused on a work emergency she's engineered. Some crisis with a major client that will conveniently distract him for the next week. After Nadine left, I immediately called Theo to verify her claims and Margaret to initiate legal countermeasures. Then, after a moment's thought, I called Daniel. He answered with obvious reluctance. "Mom, I'm on my way to a lunch meeting with Sophia. At the Islander," I finished. "I know. I won't keep you. I just wanted to ask if you'd had a chance to review the materials I gave you." A pause. "Some of it. I've been dealing with a client emergency. A sudden crisis that requires your immediate attention, distracting you from other concerns?" I kept my tone conversational. "How convenient." His breathing changed, a slight hitch that told me my words had struck a nerve. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just an observation on the timing." I moved to the real purpose of my call. "Daniel, whatever Sophia asks you to sign today, regarding the house, regarding me, regarding anything of significance, I strongly advise you to read it very carefully. Perhaps even have your own lawyer review it first." "How do you know?" He stopped. "You're having her followed." "I'm protecting my interests," I corrected gently.
As you should protect yours.
After a long silence, he spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "The recordings. They're real, aren't they? Unedited." "Completely authentic," I confirmed. "As is everything else in that file." Another pause. "I have to go." "Of course. Enjoy your lunch." As I ended the call, Amelia appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "What's happening now?" I summarized Nadine's visit and my conversation with Daniel, watching understanding dawn on my daughter's face. "He's starting to see it," she observed.
"The truth about her."
Perhaps. I wasn't ready to claim victory yet. Or perhaps he's just experiencing justifiable doubt. Either way, I've given him a warning. What he does with it is his choice. We were just preparing dinner when the security system announced an approaching vehicle. The cameras showed Daniel's Porsche racing up the driveway, braking sharply near the entrance. He got out alone, his movements radiating a barely contained fury that reminded me painfully of his father in rare moments of genuine anger. I met him at the door, bracing for the storm he was bringing with him. "She tried to get me to sign a power of attorney," he said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled rage. "A document giving her authority to act on my behalf in all matters concerning family property, buried in legalese about mutual representation during professional obligations." Relief washed through me, though I kept my expression neutral. "I see." "No, you don't." He pushed past me into the house. Because that's not even the worst part. When I questioned it, when I insisted on reading it thoroughly, she had a complete meltdown, started accusing me of not trusting her, of letting you manipulate me. He paced the entryway like a caged animal. And then her phone buzzed, and I saw it. The screen notification, Coastal Vista Developments confirms tomorrow's meeting Nantucket Estate. I said nothing, letting him process his own revelation. "Everything you said, everything in those recordings. It's all true, isn't it?" His voice broke slightly. "She never loved me. She just wanted." He gestured around us at the house, at the legacy it represented. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," I said softly. He turned to face me, raw pain in his features. "How could I not see it? How was I so blind?" "Because she targeted your vulnerabilities with precision. Because she studied you, studied this family, before she ever happened to meet you. Because she is very, very good at what she does." He sank onto the staircase, his head in his hands. "I've been such a fool." I sat beside him, not touching, but close enough to offer comfort if he sought it. "You were a man who wanted to be loved. There is no shame in that desire." For several minutes, we sat in silence, the weight of the revelation heavy between us. Then Daniel straightened, a new resolve replacing the shattered anger in his expression. "I need your help, Mom. To end this. To undo what I've done." I placed my hand on his, feeling the first tentative bridge being rebuilt between us. Of course. That's what family is for. Daniel stayed the night in the guest room, the first time he had slept under this roof in nearly 2 years. I heard him pacing in the room above my bedroom long after midnight, his footsteps a restless rhythm. When morning came, he appeared in the kitchen, disheveled but determined, the boyish charm that had defined him for decades stripped away to reveal something harder, more defined. "I've been ignoring her calls and texts," he said, accepting the coffee I offered him. There were 37 overnight, increasingly frantic. "What do you want to do?" I asked, giving him the space to direct what came next. He met my gaze directly. "End it. Completely. But first, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with." He gestured to the folder Nadine had provided. "May I?" I slid it across the counter. It's not pleasant reading. For the next hour, Daniel examined everything: the forged power of attorney, the fabricated letters supposedly from Alexander Vogel, the screenshots of Sophia's communications with tabloids and developers. With each page, his expression hardened further. "She was planning to have you declared mentally incompetent," he said finally, his voice flat with controlled fury. "To have me put under a conservatorship, and then transfer control to herself through that fraudulent power of attorney." "Yes." "And to tarnish Grandpa's reputation with those fake love letters and a non-existent illegitimate child." "Yes." He closed the folder with deliberate care. "I want her out of my life, out of this family, out of this house. Permanently." "That can be arranged," I replied, a mixture of relief and sadness as I watched my son finally face the consequences of his impulsiveness. "Margaret has already prepared annulment papers, citing fraud and misrepresentation. They can be filed today." "Do it." He ran a hand through his tousled hair. "And the tabloids, the developers, all of her other schemes?" "Cease and desist letters have been sent. Coastal Vista has been officially informed that Sophia has no authority regarding this property. Margaret is preparing a formal complaint to the DA's office for attempted fraud and forgery." Daniel nodded, a flicker of admiration cutting through his grim expression. "You were 3 steps ahead the entire time, weren't you?" "I had to be." I kept my tone gentle, not wanting to sound accusatory. "When you exclude the family from major life decisions, we are forced to react rather than participate." He winced at the subtle rebuke. "I know. I should have," he trailed off, shaking his head. "There are a lot of things I should have done differently." Before I could respond, the security system announced an approaching vehicle. A taxi was pulling into our driveway. The cameras showed Sophia getting out, her usually perfect appearance noticeably disheveled, her movements sharp with agitation. "She's here." Daniel stood up, squaring his shoulders. "I'll handle this." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." His jaw was set. "I need to do this myself." I nodded, respecting his decision while secretly activating the house's recording system, a security measure installed after a particularly persistent paparazzo had broken in years ago. Whatever confrontation was about to happen, it would be documented. Daniel met Sophia at the door before she could ring. I remained in the kitchen, out of sight but able to hear through the open-plan ground floor.
"Daniel, thank Gott."
Sophia's voice dripped with calculated relief. "I've been so worried. Why weren't you answering my calls? What are you doing here?" "I think you know exactly why I'm here." His tone was cold, controlled in a way I had rarely heard from my impulsive son. "The game is up, Sophia." "Game? What are you talking about, darling? If this is about that document from yesterday, I told you, it was just standard legalese my lawyer recommended." "Stop." The single word cut through her performance.
"Ivy sehen evating."
"The recordings of you planning to use me to access this house. The forged power of attorney. The fake letters supposedly from my grandfather. Your meetings with developers to turn this estate into a hotel." A silence, then a dramatic shift in tone. "Your mother fabricated all of that to turn you against me, and you actually believe her?" "Nadine provided copies of everything. Including the texts between the two of you, plotting how to separate the brand fortune from its heir. Another pause, longer this time. When Sophia spoke again, the veneer of wounded innocence was gone completely.
Fine. So what now?
You think you're something special. The talented Daniel Brand, music producer to the stars. You were a mark, darling. A pathetically easy one, so desperate for validation. You never once stopped to ask why someone like me would be interested in someone like you. The cruelty of her words made me flinch. Maternal instinct urged me to intervene, to protect my son from this deliberate attempt to wound him. But this was Daniel's battle, his reckoning to face. You're right. His quiet reply surprised me. I was an easy mark. Insecure, impulsive, so focused on appearances that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. That's my fault. So what now? Sophia's voice took on a calculating tone. You run back to mommy, file for an annulment, pretend this never happened? It's not that simple. I'm your wife. I have rights.
You have nothing.
Daniel's tone remained calm. The marriage was based on fraud and misrepresentation. The prenuptial agreement you insisted we didn't need now works against you. And there will be no settlement to negotiate when the DA sees evidence of your attempted forgery and fraud. You wouldn't dare. A note of real alarm entered her voice. I will destroy you in the press. Your reputation. Your family's legacy. I will burn it all down. With what? The fake scandal you fabricated about my grandfather? The forged documents you created? Go ahead and try. Every tabloid has already received legal notice that you are peddling fraudulent stories. Every developer has been notified you have no authority regarding this estate. You son of a bitch. Careful, Daniel interrupted, his voice dropping dangerously. That's my mother you're about to insult. The woman you dismissed as an old lady who wouldn't live forever, who is proving to be considerably more formidable than either of us fully realized. Pride swelled in my chest at his words, not just the defense of me, but the acknowledgement of his own underestimation. Perhaps there was hope for my son after all. This isn't over, Sophia hissed. You think you've won.
You ve made an enemy you can't afford, Daniel Brandt. No.
What I've done is recognize a mistake before it cost me everything that actually matters. His voice softened slightly. You know what's sad? If you had taken the time to get to know me, the real me, not just the path to this house, you might have discovered I would have given you anything freely. Love makes me generous. Manipulation. It makes me resolute. The prenup she didn't expect would no longer be considered. You'll regret this, she spat. You both will. The only thing I regret is not listening to my family in the first place. The sound of the front door unlocking punctuated his words.
Goodbye, Sophia.
The annulment papers will be served today. Don't ever come here again. The door closed, definitively, followed by the sound of the taxi driving away. For several moments, the house was silent. Then Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression a complex mixture of pain, relief, and something I hadn't seen in years, a quiet dignity that was reminiscent of his father. Well, he said simply, that's done. I opened my arms without a word, and for the first time since his teens, my son stepped into my embrace without hesitation or pretense. He shuddered once, a physical release of tension, before pulling back to meet my gaze. I'm sorry, Mom.
For everything.
For not trusting you, for shutting you out, for demanding the house without any regard for what it means to this family. I know, I said softly.
And I forgive you. Just like that.
Disbelief colored his voice. Forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences, or that trust is instantly restored, I clarified. It just means I'm willing to move forward without holding your mistakes against you indefinitely. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning. The trust documents. Giving the house to Mia and Zoe eventually. That's not changing, is it?
No.
I kept my tone gentle but firm. Some decisions are made for the long-term protection of what's most important. The house will stay in the family, but not as an asset to be exploited or sold. That was always your father's wish, and mine. Instead of the anger I half expected, Daniel just nodded again. I get it. I finally get it. From the patio outside, laughter erupted. Amelia and the girls were returning from their morning walk on the beach, blissfully unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place. Life, in its imperfect, beautiful way, was continuing. Shall we join them? I suggested. Family breakfast on the patio. Daniel smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and was reminiscent of the boy he once was. I'd like that very much. As we stepped out into the golden sunshine, I felt a weight lift from me. Not gone entirely, but significantly lighter. The house was still standing, the legacy was protected, and my son, perhaps, was finally starting to understand what truly mattered. The legal machinery, once set in motion, moved with surprising efficiency. Margaret filed the annulment papers that afternoon, citing fraud and misrepresentation. By evening, Sophia had been served at the luxury hotel she had retreated to after the confrontation. Her response was predictably vitriolic, a flurry of threatening texts to Daniel, followed by a formal statement from Julius Brand declaring their intent to contest the annulment and seek a substantial settlement for emotional distress and reputational damage. Empty threats, Margaret assured us during a conference call. The evidence of her fraudulent intent is overwhelming. No judge will award her a significant settlement once they've reviewed the recordings and forged documents. Daniel, sitting beside me in the study, nodded grimly. The past 24 hours had visibly aged him, stripping away the carefree facade he had maintained for decades. What about the criminal aspect? The forgery attempts, the fraud? The DA's office is reviewing our complaint, Margaret explained. Given the substantial evidence and the cooperation of Nadine Schultz, I expect they will press charges. However, the prosecutor will likely offer a deal, probation perhaps in lieu of jail time, provided Sophia has no prior record. After the call ended, Daniel continued to stare at the speakerphone, lost in thought. I still can't believe I fell for it. For all of it. She was very skilled at targeting your specific vulnerabilities, I reminded him. That's what professional manipulators do. But to marry her without even introducing her to my family? He shook his head in disgust. What was I thinking? That's the thing. You weren't thinking. You were feeling, reacting to the validation and admiration she was strategically providing. I kept my tone gentle, analytical rather than accusatory. It's a pattern you might consider exploring with some professional help. He looked up sharply. A therapist, you mean? It might be beneficial. I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was necessary. Daniel, this isn't the first time you've been drawn to someone who ultimately wanted to use you rather than love you. It might be worth understanding why that pattern repeats. Instead of the defensive reaction I half expected, he just nodded. You're right. I know you're right. A pained smile touched his lips. Dad would have said the same thing, wouldn't he? Probably with more literary references and less diplomacy, I agreed, returning his smile. He always said you had his artistic temperament but lacked his analytical filter. He was right about that too. Daniel stood and walked to the window overlooking the ocean. I've made such a mess, Mom. Not just with Sophia, but with us, with this family. Messes can be cleaned up, I replied. That's one of the benefits of life. We get the chance to repair what we've damaged. Our conversation was interrupted by Mia appearing in the doorway, her expression serious beyond her 16 years. Grandma, there's someone on the news talking about us. About Grandpa. We followed her into the living room, where Amelia and Zoe were already watching the television with identical frowns of concentration. On the screen, Sophia stood at a bank of microphones, Julius Brand at her side, delivering what was clearly a prepared statement. Forced from my marital home by the manipulative tactics of my mother-in-law, she said, her expression a perfect mask of wounded dignity. While I seek justice through legal channels, I feel compelled to share certain truths about the Brand family that have long been suppressed. Daniel's intake of breath beside me was sharp. She's actually doing it. Going public with those fabricated stories. I placed a reassuring hand on his arm, watching Sophia with clinical detachment as she launched into accusations about my father's secret child and a hidden correspondence that supposedly proved his double life. We have copies of letters written by Alexander Vogel himself, she claimed, acknowledging his illegitimate daughter and arranging financial support in exchange for silence. These documents expose the hypocrisy behind the Brand family's carefully constructed public image. Those are the forgeries, Daniel explained to Amelia and the girls, his face red with anger. Created with AI to mimic Grandpa's handwriting. How do we stop this? Amelia asked, her protective instinct for our family legacy evident in her tense posture. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Cow. I assume you're watching the press conference, he began without preamble. You should know we've identified Sophia's document source. A woman named Patricia Lehman is claiming to be Alexander Vogel's illegitimate daughter, with letters to prove it. Who is she really? I asked, unsurprised by this new development. An actress from Sophia's former acting workshop. 62 years old, extensive experience in regional theater, financially distressed based on her credit report. Sophia approached her with this scheme 3 days ago. So they found someone the right age to play the part of my father's supposed daughter, I concluded. Convenient, indeed. But here's where it gets interesting. Ms. Lehman's mother did, in fact, work as a script supervisor at the Hollywood studios in the late 1950s, which gives her story just enough credibility to entice the tabloids. I thanked Theo for the information, then turned to my worried family. It seems Sophia has gone so far as to hire an actress to portray my father's non-existent illegitimate daughter. That is, Daniel struggled for words, his face a mask of fury. That is beyond contemptible. It's also ultimately futile, I assured them all. My father's life has been thoroughly documented by multiple biographers. There were no secret children, no hidden correspondence. The truth will prevail. But in the meantime, Grandpa's reputation is being dragged through the mud, Mia protested, her adolescent sense of justice ignited. We can't just wait for the truth to come out eventually. We won't, I promised, an idea taking shape. Amelia, call the university's archival department. Daniel, contact your friend at the Film Museum. I need to speak with Margaret again. As my family dispersed to make the requested calls, I stood alone before the television, where Sophia was continuing her performance, Julius Brand nodding gravely beside her as she detailed the emotional distress caused by her unjust treatment at the hands of the Brand family. You have miscalculated, my dear, I murmured to her image. Gravely. Within hours, our counter-strategy was in motion. The University of Southern California, where my father's complete papers were archived, released a formal statement confirming that Alexander Vogel's correspondence, financial records, and personal diaries had been thoroughly catalogued and contained no evidence of any illegitimate children or secret financial arrangements. The Film Museum, which housed an extensive collection of my father's scripts, production notes, and personal effects, announced a special exhibition celebrating his legacy, including previously unreleased home movies and correspondence that extensively documented his devoted family life. Most devastatingly, Margaret arranged for 3 of Alexander Vogel's biographers to appear on entertainment news programs, systematically refuting Sophia's claims with scholarly precision and historical evidence. By evening, the narrative had shifted dramatically. Entertainment blogs that had initially reported Sophia's sensational claims were now questioning her credibility and motives, with several noting the convenient timing of her accusations immediately following annulment proceedings based on fraud. The final blow came from an unexpected source, Patricia Lehman herself, who contacted a major entertainment website to recant her claims, admitting she had been paid to portray Alexander Vogel's daughter and had been provided with forged letters to support her story. Ms. Schreiber assured me it was just a negotiation tactic, she confessed in the published interview, a way to pressure the Brand family into a settlement. I never intended to harm Alexander Vogel's legacy or memory. When the DA's office announced the next morning that they were investigating Sophia Schreiber for attempted fraud, forgery, and potential witness tampering, Julius Brand resigned as her counsel, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. We were eating lunch on the patio when Daniel received a text from Sophia, her first communication since the spectacular collapse of her tabloid strategy. She wants to meet, he said, staring at his phone with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Says she's willing to sign the annulment papers without contest if I can stop the legal action regarding potential criminal charges. That's not actually in your power, Amelia pointed out. The DA presses charges based on evidence, not the victim's preference. Besides, I added, such a meeting would only give her another opportunity to manipulate or create a narrative that serves her purpose. Daniel nodded slowly. You're both right. He typed a brief reply, then set his phone aside, definitively. I told her all future communication should be through lawyers only, that any further direct contact will be added to the restraining order Margaret is preparing. Good for you, Amelia said approvingly. It's strange, Daniel mused, gazing out at the ocean. A week ago, I thought I was in love with her, ready to start a life together. Now, I can barely remember what that felt like. It's like waking up from a particularly vivid but ultimately meaningless dream. Some dreams fade quickly in the light of day, I observed, especially those built on illusion rather than substance. Down on the beach, Mia and Zoe were collecting shells, their animated conversation carried up to us on the breeze. The sight of them, these remarkable young women who represented our family's future, filled me with a deep gratitude that the crisis had been averted, that their eventual inheritance was protected. I've been thinking, Daniel said, following my gaze to his nieces, about what you said. About getting professional help to understand my patterns. I found a therapist. I have an appointment next week. He offered a self-deprecating smile. Apparently, there's a waiting list for entertainment industry professionals with narcissistic tendencies and boundary issues. The gentle self-mockery, so reminiscent of his father's humor, brought an unexpected sting of tears to my eyes. I'm proud of you, Daniel. He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Thank you, Mom. For evaluating. For seeing what I couldn't. For fighting for what's important when I was too blind to see its value. As we sat there, the three of us, enjoying the simple pleasure of a family lunch in the house that had witnessed so many chapters of our shared history, I felt a calm settle over me. The storm had not destroyed us. If anything, it had reinforced the foundations that truly mattered. To new beginnings, Amelia proposed, raising her glass in a toast. And to old wisdom, Daniel added, joining the gesture. I raised my own glass, my heart full. To family. The real thing. 6 months can change everything, or nothing at all. In our case, it was somewhere in between. Autumn arrived, bringing a golden light that transformed the Nantucket coast, casting long shadows on the patio where I reviewed the final annulment decree. Daniel's marriage to Sophia was officially over, dissolved with remarkable efficiency once she realized the futility of fighting the overwhelming evidence of her deception. The criminal charges had been settled through a plea agreement, 2 years probation, community service, and a restraining order prohibiting her from contacting any member of the Brand family. A relatively lenient sentence, but one that achieved our primary goal of removing her permanently from our lives. More importantly, these 6 months had brought healing. Gradual, imperfect, but real nonetheless. Daniel had committed to his therapy with an unexpected dedication, exploring the insecurities and patterns that had made him vulnerable to manipulation. He had moved into a smaller house in Boston's Beacon Hill, a conscious step away from the ostentatious lifestyle that had defined him for decades. Less to prove, he'd explained simply when I visited his new place. Less to hide behind. Amelia and the girls had returned to their lives in Massachusetts, where Mia was now applying to colleges, including USC, where her great-grandfather's papers were archived, and Zoe was becoming a competitive surfer, her natural talent honed by the summer on our private beach. And I had spent these months reflecting on the legacy I was preserving. Not just the physical property, but the values and connections it represented. The trust documents ensuring the house would pass to my granddaughters remained in place. But I had made a significant addition, a detailed family history, chronicling not just the glossy moments of cinematic success, but the harder lessons learned through crisis and recovery. Today, my family was gathering again, this time for a planned celebration rather than an emergency intervention, my 70th birthday. A milestone I was approaching with the placid confidence of someone who has recently been tested and found her strength intact. Daniel arrived first, carrying a massive arrangement of hydrangeas, my favorite, and a small, carefully wrapped gift. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, hugging me with the easy affection that had defined our relationship before ambition and insecurity had driven a wedge between us.
You look beautiful.
Flattery, I replied with a smile, but I'll take it graciously. In the kitchen, he moved with a familiar ease, helping Maria prepare the appetizers for dinner. This was, perhaps, the most significant change, his willingness to participate in the mundane aspects of family life, rather than arriving late, making a dramatic entrance, and then leaving early for some can't-miss industry event. Before everyone else gets here, he said, setting down the knife he'd been using to slice cheese, I wanted to give you this privately. He handed me the small package, watching intently as I unwrapped it. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, its cover embossed with my initials. Open it, he urged gently. I did, and found on the first page, in his distinctive handwriting, the inscription, "For my mother, who taught me that legacy is not measured in property or possessions, but in the wisdom passed from one generation to the next. This is my contribution to our family story, imperfect, honest, and offered with love." The pages that followed contained his writing, reflections on growing up as the grandson of Alexander Vogel, the son of Henry Brand, Olivia Brand's occasionally difficult child. Memories of this house, this beach, this family in all its complicated glory. Acknowledging mistakes, celebrating triumphs, exploring the values that had shaped him, even as he had resisted their influence. Daniel, I said, my voice thick with emotion, this is extraordinary. It was my therapist's suggestion, at first, he admitted, to write about the patterns I was trying to understand. But it became something more. A way of connecting with our family story, with the legacy I almost destroyed. I hugged him, this son who was finally growing into the man his father and I had always hoped he would be. This is the most meaningful gift you could have given me. There's more, he said, pulling back slightly. I've been working on a documentary about Grandpa Alexander. Not the film legend everyone thinks they know, but the man behind the typewriter. The father, the husband, the mentor to young writers. I've been interviewing people who knew him, digitizing his home movies, creating something that captures his true legacy. He would have loved that, I said, deeply moved by this project that showed such an understanding of what truly mattered, using his talents to preserve his memory authentically. I thought we could screen it here, Daniel suggested. A little showing on the patio, where he used to tell us stories. Family first, then maybe a wider audience later. Perfect, I agreed.
Absolutely perfect.
Amelia arrived an hour later with the girls, bringing more gifts and the chaotic energy that multiple generations always create when gathered under one roof. As Maria served dinner on the patio, the Atlantic stretching before us in deepening shades of blue, I looked around at these people who were the true home of my heart. Mia was earnestly discussing film preservation techniques with Daniel, her academic brilliance reminiscent of her mother's but tempered by her own unique perspective. Zoe was regaling us with stories from her latest surfing competition, her confidence and joy so much like Henry in his younger days. Amelia watched her daughters with quiet pleasure, occasionally catching my eye with the wordless understanding that passes between mothers across generations. And Daniel, engaged and present in a way he hadn't been in years, was listening more than he was speaking, contributing without dominating, finding his place within the family structure rather than performing for an audience of admirers. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting a golden light across our gathering, I stood to propose a toast. To 70 years, I began, raising my glass. Most of them good, some of them challenging, all of them part of a story that is still being written. To Grandma Liv, Mia added, who showed us what strength really looks like. To this house, Amelia continued, and everything it stands for. To family, Daniel concluded, his gaze meeting mine with a newfound understanding.
The real thing.
We clinked glasses as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that no set designer in Hollywood could replicate. In that perfect moment, I felt the presence of my father, the spirit of my husband, the continuum of love and legacy that connected us all across time. Later, as darkness fell and lanterns illuminated the patio, Daniel set up a projector to show some of the footage he had unearthed for his documentary, home movies my father had taken of family gatherings in this very spot. Grainy images of a much younger me chasing a toddler-aged Daniel on the beach. Henry, handsome and vibrant, debating film theory with my father. My mother arranging flowers in the kitchen, laughing at some forgotten joke.
Die forgotten These existed, I mom uret, Wetching These ghosts of our younger selves flicker across the impromptu screen.
They were in the USC archives, Daniel explained. Grandpa donated them, but they were never digitized. Until now. There are hours of footage. Our history, preserved in light and shadow. As we watched these precious fragments of the past, I felt a profound sense of continuity. The knowledge that while individuals may pass, something essential endures through the stories we tell, the values we pass down, the love we share across generations. The house would remain, eventually passing to Mia and Zoe as the trust decreed. But the real inheritance had already been transferred, not through legal documents or property deeds, but through moments like this, where the meaning of family was demonstrated rather than just discussed. Daniel had learned that lesson the hard way, through crisis and near catastrophe. Amelia had absorbed it gradually, through observation and experience. My granddaughters were receiving it now, witnessing the restoration of something precious that had almost been lost. As for me, at 70 years old, I had reaffirmed what I had always known but had sometimes failed to articulate clearly enough, that our most valuable possessions are not things at all, but the connections between us, the shared understanding of what matters most, the legacy of love that outlasts material wealth. "Look," Zoe exclaimed, pointing at the screen where the camera had captured a much younger me standing beside my father on this very patio, both of us looking out at the ocean as the sun went down. "What were you and Grandpa talking about?" Mia asked, ever curious about the family lore. "I remember that day," I said softly. "He was telling me about legacy. About how this house wasn't just walls and windows, but a repository for our family's soul." I smiled at the memory. I didn't fully understand what he meant then. But I do now. Daniel reached over to squeeze my hand, a wordless understanding passing between us. He knew now too. The lesson he had almost learned too late. As the home movie ended and the screen went dark, we remained on the patio, listening to the eternal rhythm of the waves against the shore, surrounded by the tangible and intangible inheritance that defined us. A house full of memories, a family healed by crisis, a legacy preserved not just in trust documents and property deeds, but in the hearts and minds of those who understood its true worth. Some lessons come at a high cost, but the ones that matter most are never truly lost, as long as we have the wisdom to recognize them and the courage to protect what truly matters. In the end, that is what legacy truly means. The Brand family, having navigated the storm, had emerged stronger and wiser, with a renewed appreciation for their true inheritance. Thank you for following their journey from betrayal to healing, from misunderstanding to clarity, from potential loss to a deep appreciation of what truly matters.